It is week 11, and the injury bug is so strong that it even impacted the host of this show. Let's get into week 11 DFS picks. Welcome in to DFS Academy. I am your host this week, Austin Amandolia. Our typical hosts, the one and only Ryan Weiss, had a little illness come down. So, injuries keep happening in the NFL, and apparently they're happening on the club fantasy team as well. Ryan Weiss is listed as doubtful for the next day or so, but hopefully we'll get him to questionable soon. With me, as always, the one and only Kelly. Kelly, how are you this morning?
I am good. It's super early. I'm traveling. I'm in California, so it is 6 a.m. Good morning.
Yes. When Kelly was like, we're going to do this live and it's going
Mhm.
to be 6 a.m. for me, I was like, you know what? Bless you. It's 9 for me. It feels very typical. So we're thankful for you getting up this early in the morning. But before we get in, a reminder, you can play DFS with us on both DraftKings and FanDuel. We have $2 contests that run every week. And as we fill the contest, we'll begin to add more contests or make the contest size bigger. But in the meantime, you can compete against us. And by the way, I'm really bad at these contests. So you can indeed beat us very easily. I set the bar really low, frankly, because tournaments are not
No,
my thing.
I've been setting the bar very low, and I keep saying every week it's because I am trying to get cute. Like I feel this need to play every single person in my core, and then I slap in something completely random to make it work, and that does not work, people. These are players to help you build a core, not play them all.
Yeah, that is fair. Yeah, when I end up playing all of my picks, something tends to go wrong. It's
Mhm.
the way it happens. But we are going to start off with answers to the test. This is breaking down last week's Millie Maker winner and slate breaker. So last week, the Millie Maker scored 242.96 points with Dak Prescott, Rashad White, Devin Singletary, CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Noah Brown, TJ Hawkinson, Jake Ferguson, and the Houston Texans. Kelly, any initial takeaways on this lineup?
Man, I don't know that anybody saw Devin Singletary coming out with like 150-yard rushing, like a single game. That was quite surprising and exciting. Noah Brown also, I mean, the Texans just lit it up last week, but they are banged up this week, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But what a lineup, honestly.
Yeah, I had a feeling TJ Hawkinson was going to make his way in there after watching the opening part of that Minnesota game. He had like 10 targets in the first half. I'm like, oh my gosh, why didn't I play him everywhere in cash and whatnot? But, you know, worked out for the Millie Maker winner. Slate Baker was Keenan Allen. I mean, who's shocked? Keenan Allen, he's just incredible, scoring 43 and a half points on DraftKings, 35 points on FanDuel. And, we should have known, I guess, this Detroit Los Angeles game would be a barn burner, but it was a fun one, that's for sure. So we're going to get
I
into
agree.
top of the class. These are our players that are priced at 8K or more. These are the most expensive players on the slate that we're targeting. I'm going to get us started on this one with Tyreek Hill at 9,300 on DraftKings and 9,500 on FanDuel. He's pricey. He's the most expensive receiver on the slate, but it's Tyreek Hill. The Miami Dolphins have an implied team total of 30 points this week. They're expected to produce at least 30 points on offense. And I am out here just saying, I want Tyreek Hill to score all 30 of those points. Like, I'm riding with the betting favorite for the offensive player of the year. It's really simple. I think in cash lineups this year, a clear strategy for me has been like, what expensive receiver are you paying up for? Because all of the elite receivers have seemed to hit. CeeDee Lamb, AJ Brown, Tyreek Hill, like they are expensive, but they're hitting their salary even at that price. So I'm going with Tyreek Hill this week just because I feel like coming out of the bye week, he's going to light the world on fire. And Kelly,
Yeah,
you have a running back for us at top of the
I
class.
do. I do. I have Austin Ekeler, 8.6 K King, 8.6K on DraftKings, 8.8K on FanDuel, and an 8, lots of eights here, 8% rostership projection, which is super interesting to me because this is a really great matchup, in fact, for running backs, but perhaps it's the overall defense that's scaring people off and they're not necessarily thinking positionally. But this could be his fourth game in a row with 70 or more scrimmage yards and a touchdown, fourth in a row. So I like those odds, and I like Austin Ekeler. He's Austin Ekeler.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with Austin Eckler. I also, because of the matchup, I considered him for my cash game player pool this week, because he's always a consideration. But for me, it's just too price prohibitive given the roster construction. But that's a great reason to target him on tournaments because people aren't going to want to spend up for him. Moving on next to our band nerds. Now, Ryan always gets to talk about this. So we never got to talk about why I called this the band nerds because I was the band nerd in high school and college. And so I was, I was a good student. I was thriving with those A's, but I was never like, I was never valedictorian level. I wasn't ever going to get there. So that's where this name came from. It was me. I inspired the name of this theme. These are the mid-tier players who are priced between 6 and 8K. And we're going to get started. Kelly, I'm going to have you start us on this one. You have a couple of fan favorites.
Yeah, yeah, I do. Fan favorites, but I have found that um, fantasy managers, DFS managers this week, they have so many choices here that we're looking at low to mid-range rostership on CJ Stroud, which to me is mind-blowing, but there are some other fantastic matchups this week where we're seeing higher rosterships for quarterbacks. But CJ Stroud's 7K on DraftKings, 8K on FanDuel, and as I mentioned, low to mid range rostership at 7%. This could be, no, not that. He had his third game with 350 or more passing yards already this season, which is now tied for the most in the NFL. Not just the most among rookies, the most passing yards. So they're playing, an Arizona defense that inconsistent to say the least. Missing potentially DJ Humphries. However, I would imagine he will play. It's just limited in practice this week. So defense intact, O-line pretty much intact. So the Cardinals are going to be tough, but this CJ Stroud, it's going to be hard to pass up anything involving him, including props, which we'll talk about later.
I love it. I also love that
Mm,
after like 10 weeks of me beating up on the Arizona Cardinals, you finally decided to join the club and you're just picking the players playing
no,
the Cardinals defense.
I'm not joining the club. I'm just stating facts. Um,
This is true. You can't argue with the stats against the Cardinals, but you have another great player with a great matchup going up against Tampa Bay this week.
mm,
Do I have that right?
Brandon Aiyuk. 7.2K on DraftKings, 7.8K on FanDuel. I love it when the salaries are fairly close together because it makes me feel like they know something that we don't, but we all know. So, uh, low to mid rostership here, 7%. Again, I think there are matchups that people are just really liking better, but I love to look at the data each week that we receive from the NFL. And it is his 7th game in a row. This could be his 7th game in a row with 50 or more receiving yards. And again, that would be an excellent prop. Take a look at receiving yards, and if it's around that 50 mark, I'm in on the over for the 7th game in a row. What? Projected for 14.9 fantasy points on DraftKings, 12.6 on FanDuel. Very manageable salary for this part of your roster. So, Brandon Aiyuk.
Yeah, I love it. Confirmed he is matching up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which is why I also like Brock Purdy as a potential cash play for this week, just because that Tampa Bay secondary is gross. Receivers have been able to perform well against them in general, but I'm here to talk about Kelly's quarterback, the Arizona Cardinals quarterback, and Kyler Murray as my cash play at quarterback this week. He is 6,100 on DraftKings and 7,600 on FanDuel. He looked great coming out. I was very impressed. Whenever players come off of knee injuries and ACL tears and whatnot, I'm always a little bit worried about that first game back because usually there's an acclimation period. And he didn't light the world on fire, but he had about a 60-yard run with all of the running around he did in total. It translated about 10 yards down the field, but it looks like a 60-yard run in total going all the way from one side of the field to the other. So that makes me feel good about the floor that he will have, being able to use his legs pretty comfortably out the gate. And then he also has a good matchup this week. Like Houston, they started off the season really good against passing offenses, but they've struggled a little bit more in recent weeks. And as we've seen, they've gotten into a couple of shootouts, letting Baker Mayfield and Joe Burrow light up their secondary. So I feel good about the spot for Kyler Murray. And this might be the cheapest we're going to get him for the rest of the season. If he continues to have the rushing upside that he showed last week, 6,100 is a steal. He needs 18 points to pay off his salary. And I love that, especially on FanDuel. I really value the rushing quarterbacks because they have a safer floor and it takes less for them to pay off their salary than these pocket quarterbacks that have to score multiple passing touchdowns. So we're riding with Kyler Murray. Now, I also have one Tony Pollard in my player pool this week, which is very nerve-wracking for me because the last time I picked Tony Pollard as part of my DFS cash pool, he failed me. And this is a player that I was very down on coming into the season, particularly in best ball leagues. I just faded him, didn't draft him at all. And in general, it's paid off, but I think it's gone a little bit too far. There's no way Tony Pollard is as bad as RB22 on a week-to-week basis, which is where he currently is in DraftKings scoring. I think this is a smash matchup against the Carolina Panthers, who I love to pick on when it comes to running backs. And I looked, and typically I'm a little scared off when teams are doing better against positions in recent weeks. The Carolina Panthers have performed pretty well against running backs the past 3 weeks. But when I looked at those games, they played the Houston Texans. They played 2 other teams that did not have running games that scared me, and they're escaping me right now. But overall, their matchups have not been great since they came off their bye week. So, yeah, they've been performing well, but they haven't had to play against the freaking Dallas Cowboys, who are just destroying teams left and right. So I feel great about Tony Pollard. That's right. The Houston Texans or the Carolina Panthers, they also played the Indianapolis Colts and the Chicago Bears in that 3-game span where they've been better against running backs. Those teams aren't really scaring me this year. They haven't been elite rushing teams. Tony Pollard, he's still getting some pass game utilization, and I think this has got to be the week he gets in the end zone. It's coming. It's been 10 weeks. Hasn't happened since week 1. We're hoping for it this week. Next up, we have the Bookworms. This is the category that Ryan always messes up because it's a tongue twister. Because these are the players who are quiet with their noses in the books and easily underestimated. But look out, they're sharp. This honestly was inspired by some of my kids whenever I was a teacher who were quiet, but I always knew they know what's going on. They're not paying attention to me necessarily, but I know that they are going to ace this test whenever it comes time. So I'm going to start us off first with a receiver, and then Kelly, we have a shared player this week, which is really fun. But my player this week is Jaxon Smith-Njigba, which is really exciting that we're getting probably the best rookie receiver coming into the draft. He was almost unanimously ranked as the number one prospect this year. He's only $4,300 on DraftKings and $5,500 on FanDuel. He's been getting plenty of usage, and I think that's the thing that's really sticks out to me for JSN. Like, he's consistently getting between like 5 and 7 targets on any given week, which honestly at this price I'm good with. This is like a tight end. You just need a little bit of volume and some of those targets to translate to catches, and we're good to go. Plus, with JSN, he is able to break big plays at any moment. Like, once the ball gets in his hands, I'm waiting for a touchdown to happen. I expect that when he catches the ball, there's going to be yards after the catch. So I feel good about JSN, even just getting 4 to 6 targets at this price range. That's going to be plenty this week. Plus, if he gets in the end zone, all the better. And the LA Rams have struggled against opposing receivers, particularly in recent weeks. So it's also a great matchup in what should be a fun divisional battle. Now, I alluded to the fact that Kelly and I have a shared player this week. And that shared player is none other than Arizona Cardinals tight end 1, Trey McBride, who is $4,400 on DraftKings and $5,900 on FanDuel. So I'm going to talk about why I like him from a cash game perspective, and then Kelly will want to hear what you have to say about him in tournaments. But he's just getting targets all the time. Like, he has been basically the number one receiver in this Arizona Cardinals offense before Kyler Murray came back, and even when Kyler Murray came back. You know, when you have a new quarterback come into play, there's some concern, like, oh, are they going to just start targeting somebody else? Like, is Marquise Brown Kyler Murray's favorite target? And maybe he is, but Trey McBride is just so good that you can't ignore him. He has to be peppered with targets. He became the first Arizona Cardinals tight end in a really, really long time to have a 100-yard receiving game, which is wild when you think about the fact that Zach Ertz has been in that offense for the past couple of years. So I love this matchup. Also, people are just smashing him in cash games. So the good thing about that is if half of the field is playing him in cash, cool. If he hits, you're good. If he doesn't hit, it probably isn't going to hurt you that badly. And so might as well ride with chalk. And that's my approach with Trey McBride this week. But Kelly, you like him in tournaments.
I do. I found that when I was building this section of our show, and even as I'm writing my article, this is where I am kind of on the bandwagon with everybody, and all DFS managers seem to be there. Trey McBride, 18% rostership, which is as high as you can get over on the tight end side. Tight ends are about to become a lot more valuable with the loss of Mark Andrews last evening. I don't want to talk about it. Please respect my privacy at this time. But Trey McBride, as you mentioned, super manageable salary right now, which is wild to me considering all the things that you mentioned. 8 or more catches and 95 or more receiving yards in 2 of his last 3 games, including the one you described with Kyler Murray back leading the team. That was 131 receiving yards. So just wild. It's going to continue. I have said this on a couple of podcasts over the last couple of weeks that Trey McBride reminds me of Mark Andrews, excuse me, in the sense that they are both enormous human beings. They seem to stand head and shoulders above the rest, which I know is not unique for tight ends, but they're also built like freaking Mack trucks and can catch anything that comes their way. So I like watching Trey McBride play. It's exciting besides all of that.
Yeah, McBride has been just too good this year, especially in recent weeks. And Joel, just chiming in the chat, saying McBride feels too easy at that price, has to be a trap. And you know what? That's exactly what I thought last week, because going into the 4 o'clock games and cash last week, I was behind. And I was like, okay, I've got to restructure the remaining bit of my lineup to get some upside in there to try and cash. And I thought, oh, everybody's going to play Trey McBride. That feels like a trap. I'm going to avoid him and try and just ride with somebody else like Noah Fant that no one's going to play and has a bunch of upside because of the Seahawks offense. And then McBride smashed, and he probably could have helped me cash last week. I made some other mistakes, but like McBride just killed it last week, and I'm going to keep riding with him until it fails. So I get it. It feels like a trap. I have not touched his props this week because it feels like a trap. I'm like, I can't be all in on McBride, but I'm definitely going to ride with him in cash lineups this week. Kelly, you are also going back to another player who smashed last week, Devin Singletary.
Yeah, this one to me did feel like a bit of a trap. However, the Texans are a bit banged up. And by a bit, I mean, go check the injury report, and it's a list within itself, including some key offensive players. So Devin Singletary has the opportunity to earn more targets just because of the unfortunate state of the Houston, Texas injury report. So this salary is so manageable that it's hard to stay away from against that inconsistent Arizona defense, and 20% plus projected DFS managers agree. But these two, Trey McBride, Devin Singletary, while they are the highest owned out of all of my picks, I would say that this is where you go with the points, you go with the strategy that obviously other DFS managers are seeing, and you zig and zag somewhere else in your roster.
Yeah, I love it. I think Devin Singletary is cash viable this week, especially if Damian Pierce does not end up playing. He's getting so much volume. But we're getting close to the end of the show. So now's the moment when I remind everyone that you can play with us every week on DraftKings and FanDuel. The links for those leagues are in the description of this show. You can also catch it on my DFS Cash article that's going to be dropping today, and in Kelly's article that'll be dropping tomorrow. So come join us. Also, if you're here live with us at 9 a.m., you probably enjoy this show. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you turn those notifications on. It means the world to us. It costs you nothing. We're aiming to hit 1,000 subscribers. So I'd appreciate any subscriptions. Share it with your friends. Pester your significant other to enjoy the sport that we all obsess over, whatever it takes. But up next, we have Ryan Weiss's favorite category, the C's Get Degrees category. These are the punt players of the week. They are less than 4K in cash, they're less than 4K on DraftKings. They tend to be a little bit more expensive on FanDuel because FanDuel doesn't get down that bad. But Kelly, we're going to get you started. You have a couple of great punt plays this week.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to be surprising that I'm picking up another tight end here. This will fill my flex spot on many lineups because I'm going to want to spend more money elsewhere this week. So in my flex spot, I'm feeling good about tight end. I never can pronounce this first name, so I won't try, but Okonkwo.
Chigoziem.
Oh, Chigoziem Okonkwo. Thank you. 3.2K on DraftKings. And then quite a bump over there on FanDuel at 4.8K. Still can be a value depending on what else you have going on over there. Typically, we don't see that much of a spread, but we have that. We're looking at around 4% rostership this week, which is on the low end. And he has been consistent. These fantasy points per game projections for Okonkwo have been very modest. We're talking like 6 points per game, 5, 6, 7, and he's been meeting those projections each week, and that's pretty much all I can ask for when I'm looking at a salary like this, and I need salary cap relief, and I'm filling the last spot on my roster. So that's why I like it. Consistency wins the day.
I love it. I feel like Chick is also this player that one week he's going to pop off, and everybody that was super in on him in the preseason is going to get back on that bandwagon, and he's going to just get hyped up everywhere. Dynasty leagues are going to go berserk with all the trade offers. I can't wait for it to happen because he's too good of a player. Love the consistency play. You also have a defense for us this week, and a defense that I did not expect to see this week, but makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, I am looking at the Pittsburgh Steelers, 3.5K on DraftKings, 4K on FanDuel, and they happen to be the highest rostered defense of the week. The Pittsburgh Steelers. Why? Because the Browns are without their quarterback, as we all know. And not only that, they are not starting the quarterback that everybody expected them to start. Could that be a trap? Maybe, but I will say that they're projected for 8.5 fantasy points. The Detroit Lions were projected at 8.9 fantasy points. I think it did get rounded up to 9 fantasy points this week, but I mean, is this one of these where you're like, do I save some money? If you don't feel confident and you do need to make a differentiator in your defense, you could go with Detroit, pay up a couple hundred more, but you lose a lot of competition at 4% rostership. But I'm going with the Steelers. I like the salary and I like the odds.
Yeah, I love this pick. The reason that I didn't see the Pittsburgh Steelers this week is because when I pick defenses in cash, particularly this week, I just scrolled to the bottom and I work my way from the bottom to the top. And once I find a couple I like, I stop. So I didn't even know that the Pittsburgh Steelers were the most expensive defense on the week. But speaking of defenses, I am going with the Green Bay Packers as my punt play of the week. They are the second cheapest defense on the slate at 2,300 on DraftKings. They're a little more expensive on FanDuel at $3,700, and they are playing the Los Angeles Chargers, which is a interesting choice to make given that Justin Herbert can destroy any defense in the league and is one of the elite quarterbacks out there. But they are playing in Green Bay, if I remember correctly, and the Green Bay Packers defense has been consistently causing sacks. They have at least one sack in every game they've played this year. They have forced a turnover in 6 of their 9 games. I think, too, given the amount of offensive volume that the Chargers put up, they are snapping the ball a lot, doing a lot of plays every game. It provides opportunities for the Packers to take advantage of that, and just by sheer number of opportunities, get some turnovers, get an interception. I doubt they get 2 interceptions. If they did, that would be incredible. But also, because they're 2.3, I don't need them to do much. I just need them to not get a negative score. That's my goal, and they haven't done that at all this year. They score me 1 point. That's fine. I've got Tyreek Hill in my lineup. I've got Kyler Murray. Those guys will be able to get me to the cash line in my cash lineups. Also, on the Green Bay Packers, I have their tight end on the other side of the ball. This is Luke Musgrave at 3,600 on DraftKings and $5,200 on FanDuel. I included Luke Musgrave because I always include 2 players for this portion of the show where we're looking at punt plays. I prefer Trey McBride, but if you're saying to yourself, I'm trying to pay up for, let's say you're trying to fit Austin Ekeler and Tyreek Hill in your lineup, you might not be able to play Trey McBride. And so if that's the case, why not go with Luke Musgrave, who continues to be a consistent part of the Green Bay offense? He's getting a few targets a game. It's nothing special, but he's also getting passes down the field. What's impressive to me is last week, he went 2 for 60, which is wild for tight ends. And so he is incredibly efficient, and even on a lesser volume is able to pay off his salary. Plus, the Chargers have been getting passed on all season long. I don't get it. I'm pulling for them to like figure it out on defense, but they just haven't yet. And so I feel like this is a good week to target the pass catchers in the old Green Bay Packers offense. Joel Worth chiming in and reminding us, as I should have expected, to not forget Jaden Reed, who is 4K against the Chargers, who get slaughtered by slot receivers. I do love that pick. I think that is particularly a solid tournament play this week because I think Jaden Reed could get looked over. Honestly, this entire Green Bay offense could get slept on this week because people are tired of what they see as an underperforming Jordan Love. But from a fantasy perspective, he's been pretty good. He's been pretty solid. I enjoyed that I traded for him in Dynasty this offseason. But we're now to the prop quiz, which is brought to you by BetStamp. BetStamp funnels all of your betting in DFS into one place to help you get the best bang for your bets. If you use the link in the description, you can see what sportsbooks and DFS sites are available in your state and receive a deposit match for whatever site you sign up with. You'll start making money in no time. You can even help with prop bets, as can we. I am a big fan of BetStamp. I have found many new websites through them, as I have mentioned multiple times on this show. But for our props this week, let's just look back to last week real quick. I went 2 of 5. This streak is starting to get me down. We've got to get right. So I spent like extra time this week, like studying which picks I wanted to make this week. Last week, now on the season, I am at 53%. So we're still above 50%, and we're going to try and keep that stable as we move forward to the end of the year. I have 5 picks this week, and all of these player lines were the same on every site I saw, which I guess we're at that time of year. You know, as the year goes on, the sites get better at predicting what players are or are not going to do. But first, I have Jerome Ford over 11.5 receiving yards, which is on Underdog, Boom, if you play there, or Thrive Fantasy. I love this line because the Cleveland Browns, they're not good now that they have Dorian Thompson-Robinson under center, and I imagine they're going to be dumping the ball off a lot, and Jerome Ford should be a nice beneficiary of that. I've also got Aaron Jones over 52.5 rushing yards, which is again going up against Los Angeles Chargers. They've still been struggling against running backs, and I expect Aaron Jones to get back on track this week. I'm taking Jalen Waddle under 63.5 receiving yards. You would be surprised how often he hits the under on his receiving line. Jalen Waddle is this player that he either smashes his receiving line and it's like his receiving line's like 60 yards and he got 120, or he hits the under. It's just, that's his game. He gets targets, he'll get in the end zone, but he usually isn't putting up a ton of yards, which is surprising given his skill set. He's also been dealing with injury a little bit, and honestly, I could see this game being Tyreek Hill scores 2 touchdowns early, and then Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert just run the ball the rest of the game, and they don't even need Jalen Waddle. That could easily be where this goes, so I'm taking the under. Then we've got Breece Hall over 56.5 rushing yards. New York Jets. Breece Hall is all they got, so he's going to get plenty of volume, and the Buffalo Bills have not been great against the run lately, so I'm expecting Breece Hall to do well. And then we've mentioned the Arizona Cardinals having a good matchup this week. I'm taking Marquise Brown over 57.5 receiving yards. I think he would have hit this last week if he'd just been a little bit closer on that deep shot from Kyler in the end zone. And it also would have helped my cash lineup. Whatever. It's fine. That's the way the sport works. It's random. But I think this week he's going to bounce back. He's still a prominent target in this offense with Kyler Murray on the field. So I'm taking the over. Kelly, you also have some picks for us, and you killed it last week. You went 4 for 4?
I did. I went back. I checked. I write up the props that I put here in the show are props that I pull out when I'm looking at the data. I mentioned NFL Communications sends out to media something called a capsule, and each week it has all of the data, and I use it to place my bets. I use it to write my articles, to pick my DFS lineups. But yeah, last week, Goff hit the over in passing yards. Gibbs had a rushing touchdown and over 50 scrimmage yards, so you could have done either of those. Mixon hit the over on scrimmage yards and had a rushing touchdown. Metcalf hit the over on receptions, and all of those were laid out in the show or in my article, and they all hit. So yay! I'm going to do the same thing this week, and I'm going with the data, Austin.
I love it.
This one, it makes me a little nervous, the Stroud passing yards, because it has greatly increased. When I first looked at this bet, it was at 254.5 passing yards for CJ Stroud. Now he has been passing for well over 350. So I'm not super nervous, but it has increased quite a bit. It is now 267.5 on Underdog for the passing yards. I'm still going on the over with CJ Stroud. Woo, woo, woo.
I love it. That one made me nervous too. I stared at it for a while.
I'm also thinking the same with Jared Goff, because this, as I mentioned in an article this week, this would be his 5th game in a row with 250 or more. So I liked that. He's now at 276.5. It makes me a little nervous as well, but I'm going to go with it. Goff on the over passing yards again this week. Aaron Jones, 53.5 rushing yards. I'm going with the over. Why? Because this could be his 3rd game in a row with 50 or more rushing yards, and 53.5 is not much of a stretch. If you want to hop in there, you better lock it in now, because these are growing by the minute. Kyler Murray. This is a spicy bet on Underdog, so you gotta go grab it. A rushing or a receiving touchdown. That's it. So I like that. Trey McBride, 54.5 receiving yards. We're going with the over because, as we mentioned, he's had 95 or more receiving yards in the last 2 of 3 games, including last week, which was 134 or 131 receiving yards. So I'm all in Trey McBride over 54.5 receiving yards. DJ Moore, 64.5 receiving yards over. Justin Fields is back. The guys got to eat. The Detroit Lions are a good, decent defense, but they do allow quite a few points when it comes to wide receivers. And DJ Moore has had 50 or more receiving yards in 6 of his last 7 games. So we're looking for that trend to continue. DJ Moore over 64.5 receiving yards.
I love it. Those are some great picks. And Josh showing up to say, as long as the Texans running game keeps sucking, Stroud will keep throwing. I think you're forgetting about the fact that Devin Singletary ran for 150 yards last week, but in general, your point stands. And I think CJ Stroud should be good this week. I love those picks. I love the Kyler Murray spicy pick. Would love to see him get into the end zone this week. But enough of props. It's time for our valedictorian shootout, which Ryan called it. He called his shot. He called your shot. Kelly won last week, beating me 111.06 to 101.66. So that brings Kelly to 2-8 on the year, which is great. It's time for Kelly to hit her hot streak and just like tear through the rest of the season. But since you won, you get to announce your lineup first this week.
I am currently building my lineup as per my usual conundrum. So if you want to start, I will pass the honors over to you, and I will continue building.
Perfect. So my lineup this week, we are starting with Kyler Murray as my quarterback at 6,100. I already mentioned this earlier in the show. Really love his spot this week and hope he hits that over on the rushing receiving touchdown. We're doing a 2 running back build this week. I usually go 3. This week we're just picking 2. We're going with Tony Pollard at 6,600. just still like it just doesn't sit right in my gut. I'm trying to trust the process on this one, but I might just have to like we'll see. We'll see if I make it to Sunday on this pick. Then I have Aaron Jones at 6,200. Still love that spot. My receivers, I have Tyreek Hill at 9,300, paying big. Next, I have Terry McLaurin at 5,800. And if you want to hear about why, go read the A list when it drops later today, because I talk about why I love that spot for him against the New York Giants. We've got Jaxon, Smith-Njigba at 4,300. And in the flex spot, I can't stop it. We're going with Deontay Johnson. He was awful last week because the Pittsburgh Steelers decided they weren't throwing the ball anymore, which is mind-blowing to me, but it worked. They won the game. So, but this week, I'm hoping that they're going to throw the ball at least a little bit more and that some of Deontay Johnson's targets will turn into catches. Also, with DTR at quarterback for the Cleveland Browns, I'm hoping for some turnovers and some short fields for the Steelers, giving Deontay Johnson chances to land in the end zone. We have Trey McBride as my tight end at 4,400, just going with the field on that one. And then we've punted defense off a cliff with the Green Bay Packers at 2,300. So that is probably not the lineup I will play you all in our weekly league, but it will hopefully be the lineup that cashes for me this week. Kelly, what you got?
Okay. I got it. I just wrapped it up. Let's do this. CJ Stroud, Austin Ekeler, Devin Singletary, Brandon Aiyuk, Romeo Dobbs,
Ooh.
DJ Moore, Trey McBride, Okonkwo, and the Steelers as my defense this week. Now, here's what I said at the start of the show when I try and cram everybody in, then I take some random pick. I'm going with Dobbs. I don't feel like it's super random. So I'm feeling okay about this.
I love it. I looked at Romeo Dobbs a lot this week. I was very interested in him from a cash game perspective. So I'm a fan of that pick. Now, as a reminder, you can join the class. You can play with us on DraftKings and FanDuel. The links are in the description. And if you win, you get your name announced on this show. We have 2 first-time winners this week, which is really fun. On DraftKings, Smitty12 won with 174.22 points. That killed my lineup. I was at like 110 in this league. It was rough. Smitty, you should like look at one of those like 100 leagues, those like smaller tournament lineups, because that's a solid score you're getting in that tournament. And then over on FanDuel, we have Math is Golden, which I agree. I love math. Won our FanDuel league with 123.56 points. Great week for those folks. Glad we had 2 new winners. As a reminder, you can find us everywhere on the socials at clubfantasyffl.com. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and make sure you're checking out our website for 3 DFS articles every week. We have our matchup report that comes out early in the week. I release my DFS Cash article on Fridays, and then Kelly takes the show sheet for this show and puts it into an article form most weekends, which is great for you. It's great for you. Kelly, tell the people where they can find you and what you are working on lately.
Oh gosh, I've just been struggling to stay alive. I'm just kidding. I'm fine. I'm fine. Terrible joke, terrible timing. No, it's been very busy, but you can find everything that I'm working on the app formerly known as Twitter at Kelly and Phoenix.
I love it. You can find me everywhere at Austin_FFL. Reminder, hits that subscribe button. We're looking to get to 1,000 subscribers. It costs you nothing. It means the world to us. This has been another edition of the DFS Academy. We come here every Friday at 9 a.m. to get all of the best plays so that you can win some money. We'll see you next week.